Welcome to LabMinutes.com and our lab video series on Cisco ISE 3.0. This is Mehta, your instructor for this video series. For a complete list of ISE videos, you can visit our website under the security section. There you can also sign up for our newsletters to receive the latest video update. In this video, we are going to be looking at two basic but very important topics of ISE, and they are certificate and node registration. ISE uses certificate extensively in almost every authentication scenarios, as well as internal communication to other ISE servers or to external system like pxscript client or MDM servers. I can tell you already that having a proper certificate install is one of the keys to have a successful ISE deployment. The second topic is around node registration. It is very unlikely that you will only have one ISE server in production. So you might be looking at a deployment as small as 2 nodes or as many as to 40, 50 nodes supported by ISE. Either way, you will need to register additional ISE nodes at some point. So in our lab, we will show you how to build a typical 2-node deployment using a wildcard certificate. In our lab setup, we have 2 ISE VM server, LM ISE1, which we plan to have that as our primary admin monitoring at the IP address of 172.1632.102. We also have LM-ISE2 that we went through the installation a couple videos back, right, at the IP of .103. Right, we're going to use that to be our secondary admin monitoring. Both of our ISE servers are located on our server VLAN 32 that also has a Windows 2019 domain controller DNS server. I'm going to use that as our certificate server to sign our certificate signing request later on. That server has the IP of 32.40. Everything is connected to switch number 1 right here. That's access our core switch and also provide access to the internet. The first topic we are going to look at is around certificate. Let me bring up the web access or web interface of our LM-ISE1 right here. It's already been logged in. Anything related to ISE certificate, as you saw in the last video as we went through the entire ISE GUI, is located under Administration, System, and Certificates. Under System Certificate, by default, they are self-signed certificate used for various type of authentication and SAMU integration, as you can see right here. So you can locate them. You can look under the issue to and issue by, and if they're both identical, like this guy right here, LM-ISE1. On both columns, that means it's a self-signed cert, and you can see it's even said right there, default self-signed server certificate, currently being used for EVE authentication, admin, which is our admin GUI right here, the portal, and Radius DTLS. Another one that you can see is for SAMU. It's a completely different cert, although it's still a self-signed. It has a SAMU prefix right there, and this one is a self-signed used for SAMU. The other 2 certificates that you see on the tops are purpose-built certs. One of them is for ISE messaging service, and the other one is for pxscript, and they're both signed by ISE internal CA. And the way that you can tell, you can see that the issue by is different from the issue to. Right, the issue by, it's issued by the endpoint sub CA LM ISE1 for both. Okay, so by this you can tell that it's being signed by ISE internal certificate authority, which we'll look at in the next video. But just FYI, these are the 4 default certificate that comes with the system on the fresh install. Let's click into the self-signed default one right here that's being used for authentication. Let's take a look. You can see subject alternative name. It will also populate the SAN field with that, with the ISE node FQDN. If you look at the usage, this is how you can change the certificate usage, and at least for this particular certificate, it's currently being used for admin, the EVE authentication, Radius TLS. We saw that the pxscript and ISE messaging service used completely separate internal CA signed certificate, and then the SAMU has its own self-signed certificate, as you can see right there. Right, so, but these are all the usage that ISE needs. Down below, you have an option to enable certificate renewal. You can specify the period in number of days. And when the expiration comes up, the certificate will get renewed. Some of the things that you can do on this page, we already tried the edit. You can generate a self-signed certificate, so if there's a need for you to either do a manual renewal or create additional self-signed cert, you can do it right there. You can import a certificate, which you will do in a little bit, from an outside system. You can export a certificate. You can delete and then just a view. The menu down below is the trusted certificate, and this is the list of the trusted certificate that comes by default with ISE. The majority of these, as you can see, they are Cisco manufacturer cert. If you look at the name, but there are also some well-known third-party CA as well, such as DigiCert, as you can see right there. All right, there's one for VeriSign, for example. But if you use any other third-party CA that's not listed here and you need ISE to trust, then you're going to have to import that. One thing that's also recommended, if you scroll to the right-hand side, there's an expiration status column. Anything that is expired, which will be shown as a red X instead of the green check mark, should be deleted from the system. You should not keep any expired certificate. I guess it's also true for the system certificate as well. For the OCSP, if you want to connect to either internal or external OCSP services for certificate revocation check or status check, you can add it here by default. There's one that is checked against the ISE internal CA. That's why it's called internal OCSP. Otherwise, if you have an external OCSP, for example, on your enterprise CA or PKI, then you can provide the URL right there. You allow up to 2 for redundancy. You allow to cache the cert status if you want. You can clear the cache right there as well. If you need to generate certificate signing requests, here's the page to do it. And lastly, for certificate periodic check settings, you can perform revocation check on an ongoing client or endpoint active session for extra security. Right, although you're going to make ISE work a little harder just because now it has to worry about checking the status of the certificate for your endpoints. And the bottom half of this page right here is for ISE internal CA, and we'll check that out in the next video. So when it comes to installing a certificate on ISE, you have 3 options. You have Identity Cert, a Wildcard Cert, or a UCC or SAN Cert. Right. With the Identity Cert, each ISE nodes will need its own certificate. So if you have 4 nodes deployment, then you will need 4 individual certificate. Using Identity Certificate might be more secure, but the more ISE nodes you have, right, the higher the management overhead and costs if you need to pay for third party to sign the Identity Cert for you. And this is where the wildcard certificate comes in. Basically, you only need 1 certificate for your entire ISE deployment, whether you have 1 node or 50 nodes, it doesn't matter. The wildcard cert also help with the better user experience when client does not need to trust a new cert when you do like a load balance or a PSN failover, for example, to occur, because there's some operating system like Apple iOS that kind of memorizes the cert. And if you all of a sudden switch it to a server that uses a different cert, the client might not be able to reconnect. So by using the same cert throughout your ISE nodes, you know that once the client trusts one cert on one server, it will trust all other servers automatically. Some organization may see wildcard cert as security risk because if the private key is compromised on the cert, then your entire domain behind that wildcard cert becomes vulnerable. So as a compromise, there's a third option, right, between the Identity Cert and Wildcard Cert, and that is known as UCC or SAN Cert. So UCC Cert works in a similar manner to the Wildcard, where a single cert can be used on multiple ISE nodes. Hence, it has the same benefit. The key difference here is that instead of using a single wildcard attributes in the SAN field, you need to make sure that all of the name of your ISE nodes and any URL that needs to support, especially on the various type of portals that you're going to have, are included in the SAN. The benefit for that, it helps limit where the cert can be used, which is good for security, but at the same time, if you need to add new ISE nodes with a new name or even the portal, or change the name of the portal and they're not defined in the cert already, you would need to regenerate the cert or have it re-signed, which can be cumbersome. If the certificate needs to be seen by public devices like guest access use cases, it is recommended to have it publicly signed so it can be universally trusted without you having to distribute it the signing CA cert. It is also perfectly fine to use the combination of publicly and privately signed cert. Maybe for anything that is customer or visitor client facing, you can use publicly sign, and everything else you can do your privately sign or sign with your own PKI. In this lab, we are going to use the wildcard cert, and it's going to be signed by our Microsoft root CA right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to download our Microsoft root CA. Since the server we're using as a Jambox is the same as our CA, just going to do a localhost /cert srv, download CA certificate, base 64, and then download CA certificate. Going to save that on the desktop, and we're going to call that guy root. You can take a look. Just so you know what we have, it is a self-signed LM-root CA. That's the name of our CA. Click OK. Then you want to go back to ISE. Under the trusted certificate, because ISE currently know nothing about our enterprise CA, we want it to trust our CA. So import. Select the file. Right there, root cert. Friendly name, we'll call it lm-root-ca. And we are planning to use this cert for authentication within ISE, for client authentication, cert-based admin authentication, as well as for Cisco services. Click Submit. The cert should appear right there, lm-root CA. Next, we are going to create a certificate signing request for our ISE. Under CSR, generate CSR. You can spend time reading this. It just explains the various usage for the certificate. Under the usage, because we're planning to use the same cert for multiple usage, we're going to leave it as multi-use. We want to do wildcard, so that's checkbox needs to be checked. There's something that you need to be aware of when it comes to wildcard cert on ISE. This is not a typical wildcard cert that has the wildcard in the common name, also called the star.domain.com type CN. ISE wildcard cert actually needs the wildcard in the SAN field, so make sure to communicate this correctly to your cert provider and that the provider supports this type of cert. There's also a security implication of using wildcard cert as mentioned earlier. If you use your top domain in the wildcard, and the cert is compromised, then your entire domain is left exposed. A recommendation for this would be to create a subdomain just dedicated for ISE, something like ice.domain.com, which is what we have here. If you remember when we went through the installation of the VM, our domain was ice.labminutes.com, and I mentioned back then that there's a reason why we did that, and this is the reason, is to isolate the fault domain for ISE, right? And that's exactly what we are going to be doing here with the subdomain. And that way, any impact is contained within that subdomain. When you create ISE wildcard certificate in the CN, this could be pretty much anything. So it can be something like access.ice.labminutes.com. You could call it pretty much anything you want, right? As long as that same CN shows up in the SAN, which we'll do in a second. Let's go ahead and complete the rest of it. And again, just to stress, this is not a wildcard CN, as you can see. OU just said IT organization is LabMinutes. City, San Jose, state, California, country, US. In the SAN, the very first one, you need to use DNS name, and basically you just copy and paste whatever you have in the CN that has to match and just paste it right here. And then you need to add the wildcard SAN as a DNS CN as well. And that would be star.ice.labminutes.com. For the key type, we're going to leave it as RSA 2048 with SHA-256. Go ahead and click Generate. Okay, there's a little warning saying the certificate contains non-resolvable CN access.ISE0328.com. Do you want to proceed? Yes. Click OK. Next, we need to get the content of the CSR. So click View, CSR content, copy that, jumped over to our Microsoft root CA, click Request Certificate, submit using base 64, paste the content of the CSR right there, and then we're going to use, this is very important as well as far as the cert template. Normally the web server is fine for the most part, again if you only use the Microsoft CA. Here we have a template called LM-PXGrid created that we're going to use. And just FYI, this PXGrid templates contains the client authentication key usage in addition to the server authentication, just in case we decide to use the same cert for PXGrid in the future lab, right? That's just a requirement when it comes to PXGrid authentication. You need both enhanced key usage of client authentication and server authentication in there, otherwise the authentication would fail. Or actually, you won't even be able to mark this cert to be used as a PXGrid on ISE. Go ahead, click Submit. Base 64, download it. Let me rename to LM ISE 1. Save it. We can take a quick look, and you can see, just like how we specify in the CSR, the CN is access.ISE.LabMinutes.com, signed by LM root CA. And you should be doing the same thing as well when you get the certificate back from your cert provider, just to make sure that they didn't mistakenly sign this as a star dot. And then under the SAN, right here, you can see access ISE.LabMinutes.com and then star ISE.LabMinutes.com. Under EKU, like I mentioned earlier, you need both server and client if you want to use this for PXGrid, right? Otherwise, the server authentication only would be fine. Once you get the cert back from your cert provider, then all we need to do is to bind that cert with the CSR, select the cert file, LM ISE right there, friendly name. Let's call this access dot, actually let me use a lowercase. Nope, it's actually access.ISE.LabMinutes.com, and let's mark this as wildcard. For these usage checkboxes, let's skip for now. We'll circle back and take care of this. But for now, let's go ahead and bind that certificate. As I said, validity period is longer than 398 days. Might be untrusted by the browser. Click OK. All right, so at this point we have the cert installed, but not being used for anything, and we can go back and check under the system certificate. Right there, wildcard access ISE.LabMinutes.com, not being used. Now that we have the cert, we're going to switch gear a little bit and start talking about node registration. So node registration is what you need to do to build a distributed ISE deployment. Before proceeding with node registration, you should now have an idea of how many ISE nodes will be in your deployment per the guideline that we went over in the first video, right, around the deployment type and sizing. So the prerequisite for this is each node you should have designated persona already in your design. All nodes should have been installed and configured with time synchronization, preferably using the same NTP server. You also need to have DNS record added, so all the ISE server FQDNs are resolvable. All the ISE servers should be running the same version and patch level. And lastly, you need to have a knowledge of the admin account credential of all your ISE nodes, because that's what's going to be used as part of the registration. And so in our lab, like I mentioned, we're going to be doing a 2-node distributed deployment with our ISE number 1 and 2. So prior to ISE 2.3, before you can register a node, you must make them trust each other certificate, whether by importing the self-signed certificate or the CA signed cert. As of ISE 2.3, ISE can automatically prompt you to accept an untrusted self-signed cert of the node that you're trying to register, right, to help you skip that extra step. So let me show you what that looks like. So right now, both of our ISE 1s and 2s are still using their default self-signed cert because we have not assigned the usage to our wildcard. As you can see, it's still using that self-sign, and then ISE number 2, we haven't even done any kind of configuration on it, so it's still default. To register an ISE node, you go under Administration, Deployment. First thing you need to do is to make this guy a primary, because right now, and by default, it's a standalone, so let's go ahead and make a primary. Go ahead and save that. It's not going to reboot or restart the ISE nodes or anything. Just going to take a couple minutes right here. All right, unlike if you go the other way around, which is from primary to standalone, ISE node's going to restart. It's just FYI. But for the most part, you can leave it as a primary. It doesn't really do anything, and it's not much different from the standalone. While that is saving, let's make sure that our ISE number 1 can resolve the name of ISE 2. Because I'm going to SSH into ISE 1, and then ping lm-ice2.ice.labminutes.com. Okay, you can see that's pingable. Let me just copy that too. Looks like it's been converted to primary, as you can see right there. Yep, row primary. Now we can go back to the deployment. And you can see now the register button has become active, so you can click on that. Provide the host FQDN. Just copy that. We validated that you can ping that name. This is where you need the admin credential of the ISE node that you're trying to register. Provide username, password. Go ahead and click next. It's going to reach out. And there you go, right there. We are being prompted to trust the certificate of ISE 2. You can see that node they're trying to register, you have self-signed cert, which is not trusted. You want to trust it. Right? If you do, it's going to import the certificate on your behalf. And like I said, prior to 2.3, this has to be a manual process, but as of 2.3, this is kind of taken care of for you right here. We're not going to do that because we're not going to use the self-signed cert to register it. But at least I would say that that feature right there is great if you just want to create a quick deployment in the lab and not having to deal with, having a CA sign both ISE certificate, or maybe that you only have 2 nodes in your deployment. That might be sufficient. But otherwise, you're probably better off using some kind of CA sign cert. Now we're going to go back and have our ISE start using our wildcard cert. Right there, edit the wildcard. And then we're going to have it use that for admin, EAP. So have to confirm each one, radius, and portal. Right, so basically we're taking over from the self-signed cert for portal. We're going to use a default port cert group, which will be applied to all of these portal types. Go ahead, click save, and when you save that, some service is going to be restarted for the new certificate to take effect. It said right there, the portal tags are assigned to another cert. Basically, you want to take over. Yes to confirm. All right, so it said right there, the system will now restart, and we're going to be locked out. All right. So while the system is restarting, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and once that comes back, we will continue. Our ISE has come back up, and one thing you can notice is that on the top left, we don't get the certificate warning anymore because we can compare that with the ISE number 2 right here where it said not secure, but right now you get the padlock. And when you check out the certificate, you can see that is basically a wildcard cert that we just installed. Go ahead and log in to ISE. If we go back and look under the administration and certificates, what we expect to see here is under, let's see, for some reason that's weird. The EAP and radius DTLS didn't move over. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. That shouldn't cause the service to restart though. But let's see. Yep, looks like we're good here. All right, so now that all of the usage that were on the default self sign previously has been moved to the wildcard, you can see the default self sign no longer has any usage associated to that. Right now, what we need to do, and it's also good practice anyway, is to take a backup of the certificate with the export function right here. Go ahead, export. Let's go ahead and export both certificate and private key because we don't have a copy of the private key since we did the CSR on ISE. So it's good to get a copy of that just for a backup. Because it has a private key, you need to provide the password. Go ahead, do that and click export. Let's save that on the desktop. So we're now going to go ahead and register our ISE number 2 using the wildcard cert. So right now our ISE number 2 is basically fresh install, nothing is really configured. So what we're going to do now is to import that wildcard cert we just exported from ISE 1 to ISE 2. All right, let's first go ahead and extract that. Under the administration, certificates, first thing, make it trust the root CAs with the import, just like how we did it earlier on ISE 1. Go ahead and select the root, LM root CA, check all the checkboxes, click submit, and then under system certificate, let's go ahead and import that. Okay, select the node ISE 2, point to the certificate file, which is the .pem that came out of the zip file, and then for the private key is the .pkv. Provide the password that we use to encrypt the certificate. Friendly name, we'll call it the same thing, wildcard access.ice.labminutes.com. We know that's a wildcard, so we need to check that checkbox. And then replicate the usage configuration. Admin eep radius and portal. Okay, click submit. Proceed. Yep, same thing's going to happen. The service is going to go down and comes back up, and then we can continue with our node registration. So let me go ahead and pause the video one more time. All right, so ISE 2 came back. The cert warning has gone, just like ISE 1. Let's go back into the web interface. Make sure we can log in. Yep, that should be good enough. Now we can continue with our node registration. Under administration, deployment where we were earlier, we can register it again with the FQDN. Yep, I still have that. So paste it in. Admin credential, click next. Because we have the proper certificate installed now on ISE number 2, we should not be facing the same certificate warning or being asked to accept or trust the ISE 2 certificate. There you go, just went through that. Host name, IP address. The role is going to be registered as a secondary with the admin monitoring being secondary as well. PSN service enable. All right, so you modify this according to your design. We're just going to leave everything at default. We're not dealing with any other services right now. So what we have should be good enough. Go ahead and click submit. This process right here can take some time, and especially if you have a large database, assuming that you bring on additional nodes after the system has been running for a while in production, then the database where the configuration sync and all that can take some time to complete. So be patient on this. So for us, we're going to go ahead and pause our video, hopefully, because we don't really have anything configured right now, and the two nodes are on the same LAN. network as opposed to across the WAN, then you can see right now the node status is in progress. Right? Once this thing has turned green, then we will come back and finish off the lab. So let me pause the video, hopefully one last time. All right, so for our 2 nodes deployment with pretty much no config on it took roughly around 20 minutes for the registration and synchronization to complete. You can see that when it's done, you get the green check mark like this. At the same time, we can also regain the access to ISE number 2 right here. So let's go ahead and log into ISE 2 and see what that looks like right now after being added as a secondary node. Okay, but as far as ISE number 1, you can see there's not really anything that has changed on the GUI. It's just now that we have admin monitoring policy service primary for admin monitoring on ISE 1 and then secondary admin monitoring on ISE number 2. Right off the bat, we're not being dropped into the dashboard or anything. In fact, we're getting dropped into administration and then system time. If you look at the menu availability, you can see that the menus that being available is very limited. Basically, kind of get locked down to only subset of menus under the administration. We can look at server certificates right there. You can see all of the certificates, including the wildcard that we imported, but there's nothing that you can do. There's no action buttons, no import, no edit or anything. The only thing you can do is exporting it. You can still generate certificate signing request under the deployment. It only shows the local node information, which is for ISE 2. Although there's pretty much there's no configuration available in a read-only. And then there's a list of sessions that get synchronized, but we don't have anything authenticated right now, so we don't have anything to look at. At this point, the distributed deployment for ISE 2 nodes has been completed. All the changes must be made on the primary node. As you can see, even if you're trying to make changes on the secondary, there's nothing you can do anyway, so all the changes has to be done from the primary admin monitoring, or actually I should say just admin. Just happen to have monitoring on the same node. The other thing that you might also want to check is the smart license status, the connection to the server, because sometimes you might need to re-register the nodes to the smart account when you join additional nodes. So just keep in mind on that, but because we are back to running the evaluation mode, we don't have to worry about it. One last thing that I want to make a note of is around certificate. So anything regarding certificate, right, should all be done on the primary. You can see from the system certificate, there's a multiple section now, one for the ISE 1, and we also have visibility to ISE 2 certificate as well, which is identical to the certificate page we saw earlier on ISE number 2. Okay, so all the actions, renewals, import, or anything for the secondary or subsequent nodes should be done on this guy right here. As well as any additional trusted certificate that's imported to ISE, it will get distributed to all of the nodes in the deployment as well. All right, so at this point, we have successfully configured ISE 2 node distributed deployment using wildcard certificate that has been signed by our enterprise root CA. In the next video, we will continue to look at ISE certificate management, but it will be around ISE internal certificate authority. That wraps up our video on Cisco ISE 3.0 certificate and node registration. You can visit our website to view an extensive list of our lab videos and sign up to get access to additional lab contents. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video.